service payment and keeping budgetary impact to a minimum. So we think that's a nice new option to kind of help with the budgetary process over the next 5 years and only extending out one more year of the maturity. And we'll show you that in detail. And then scenario 3, you've seen before, that's if you stuck with all variable rate and continued with all the swaps, that also has the highest cost. So it has no reduction in risk, but still has the highest cost. So that, we just show it there for informational purposes. And then scenario 4, again, is if you kind of did scenario 1A, where you just did the 21As and waited on the Bs. But Carly ran a sensitivity analysis that shows if rates go down over the next year, as most experts are predicting, that the cost to do that and waiting would increase the cost relative to today. So if we move to page 5, which up on the screen is on the right-hand side of the page. So what this is scenario 1, kind of stay in the course, where you're refunding the 21As in the blue, terminating the swap related to that, refunding the 24Bs in the yellow, and terminating the swap of that. And this one is not extending any maturity, but keeping the maturity as they were previously. You can see on the far right, the cost in the green up at the top right box is about $1 million in parentheses. So that's a $1 million cost. On a PV basis, a little lower, about $936,000. So that's what has increased because the termination cost has gone up. We need to issue more bonds to pay for that cost, to pay off that swap. And so that's why the costs have gone up.
So last time we met, just to kind of compare the two, we were almost at a break-even point where we had Series A was in the money, Series B was somewhat in that ballpark, but we were about 50,000 or so. So it was going to cost us around 50,000 to do the swap, terminate both. Because of the additional termination payment, now that 50,000 payment is about $1 million. So that error is 1, 2, 3. It's in the blue on the Series A with that $1.5 million. So that was previously much lower. So the original option, which we had discussed, is now a much more costly proposition than what we had talked about, just a month ago. And part of what PFM and the team has gone back and forth is, okay, now that we know there's an additional cost, what are some options that we want to take on? And perhaps one of those options is continue the course, but there's a heavy cost associated with that. Or maybe we go out and we'll stick with A, which is still in the money and still within our parameters of about $500,000. Or maybe there's something more. And so these scenarios are just options we're going to talk about and have some more dialogue so we can make a decision collectively. But keep in mind, there's also the sensitivity analysis, which we'll go through in the end. So if the rate environment changes, which it changes, fair to say, every day, probably a couple times a day, what that would look like. And we keep hearing about rate declines and potentially the Fed cutting rates one way or the other, although we've heard this for a while now. Eventually it's bound to happen. What would a small shift in those rates look like for us? Because if we take no action today, we have to take action by next November, just based on the terms of the contract. So if we do nothing today, we have to do something next year, no matter what. So these are the sort of options and the thought process that goes through this. Sorry, John.
No, that's great. I'm glad you interjected there. I mean, as we're staying on that page, to that note, we might as well get right to the sensitivity. So we, for instance, if you just did the A's and just did the refunding and the blue there on the A's, but left the yellow as is and waited till next year, that 500, you see it in the column 2 at the bottom, the PV net cost is about $585,000. If we quickly go to page 8, what we did is ran that same scenario if we waited next year on the 21Bs and refunded it next year, but interest rates came down 75 basis points, that cost now goes up to $921,000. So there is, while there is a cost today, it could be expected that the cost would be increased by waiting a year. So I thought that was an important analysis to run for your information. And then on page 6, we thought this was, we do recognize obviously that there's an increased cost of more than we anticipated, but I know there's also a lot of, good thought process that the board went through over the last couple of months about de-risking and mitigating out of all these things. So there's, some certainty that you get from having fixed rate bonds, as I know you all discussed. But what page 6 is, trying to reflect is if we in the yellow in column 9, if we just extend the maturity by about a year, we're able to structure the bonds such that, if you look over on the far right in column 11 in the green, we're able to keep the overall debt service of the district at about $22.6 million, which is about where the current existing local effort is. And so you get that kind of budget certainty and actual no extra cost in the next couple of years. And you really, the cost is, mitigated by, it's increasing your maturity in 2033. But on a PV basis, then it's about the same as the other scenario. So you get the advantage of having the lower upfront payments. And again, these would be, locked in at fixed rate bonds. So that's kind of the one kind of new option that we get, to kind of help mitigate some of the increased costs.
Yeah, and just talking through slide 5, which is our initial approach, you could see the blue column is the cost for Series A. The yellow column is the cost for Series B, and then the combined effort, if you will, is in that green strip. So if you look at the cost of A and B, you're looking at about $120,000. First year impact continuing as is. Using that same scenario, but looking at page 6, where we were able to wrap around and essentially extend Series B by 1 year, we can see that the cash flow perspective becomes almost neutral. If anything, we're just a little bit saving money. So we can wrap that around and achieve the same de-risking, if you will, with very little budgetary impact, if any. Yeah. Dr. White.
I just want to clarify the saving, we would be saving money. Is it like buying more because we're spending less per item, saving money?
No, you're essentially extending the term by 1 year. So if you
Okay.
look at the end dates, and on page 6, you're going out 1 additional year in the Series B. Whereas on page 5, the original plan was to keep everything exactly as is. So the term of the reissuance or the terms of the bond would be exactly identical to what we have today. If we went with the options on page 6, we would extend out by 1 additional year the payments for B, and therefore we'll have what I would call almost like an amortized payment on the back end. And so if you think about it like your personal mortgage, you have an adjustable rate mortgage, you'll continue to pay that down. And then at the very end, and it's important to note on page 6, if you look at column 11, most of the payments are in the 22 million range. When you go to that final payment, we're going down to 14 million. So the area where you can afford to take on additional payments is where we're wrapping that final payment into and giving us more purchasing power while still deleveraging all of the risk that's associated with the floater. And I will say, you guys are the experts on this, of course. When you put out these floating rate notes, you essentially have to refinance every 3 years or so. There's a cost in refinancing every 3 years. So again, we're not going to time the market. We're not going to say this is the best time to go, but this does present us with an opportunity to really cut off all the risks and fix our payments so that we have a lot more certainty, especially as we take on additional projects. And option, well, we're going to call it scenario 2, does just that and presents a different alternative for us to take on.
So let me explain it. If we add another year to the mortgage, we mitigate the risk of the 2 bonds not having variable rates to them, and we get the benefit of a fixed rate bond. We also get the benefit of managing the inverse relationship between termination costs and lower interest rates. And since lower interest rates are in the future, most people believe, that means termination costs are going up. So we're hedging against higher future termination costs by wrapping this around subsequent years' debt. And we get the benefit of all the borrowing advantage of having fixed rate bonds. And we also limit any risk from on variable rate debt. So it's extending a year, it's like extending the mortgage a year to be able to satisfy all of your risk aversion.
And my understanding, just extending that a year is gonna cost about $175,000, if I'm looking at this correct. I mean, when you.
Yeah, it's the difference between 824 and 650, so about 175, let's say $200,000
Right, 'cause
over
you're
the course of
you're
the.
basically deferring principal a little bit,
Yeah.
but on a present value basis, it's about the same because the cost is about.
But the savings benefits us in the short term. How does this affect our borrowing for Fountain Hill?
I will defer to them, but from my lens, this actually makes it more attractive for us to go out and borrow because now we have fixed payment structure in place. We've essentially eliminated any interest rate sensitivity. And if you look at the last scenario on page, I can't see that number, but it looks like an 8. You can see that any little decrease, and in this case, Carly, what's the decrease? I think it's 0.5% or 75 basis points. If you do a rate sensitivity analysis and the rates go down by 75 basis points, you can see that the cost of this is going to be $2.5 million.
Yep.
So right off the bat, a little bit of a decrease has that inverse relationship and this becomes a lot more expensive. Therefore, it's less attractive for us to borrow because we have a variable rate note. And by the way, we're only talking about 2 of these.
Mhm.
We still have one that we're not taking any action on until next year. So it's likely that we could have 2 big hurdles to climb, both from a budgetary perspective as well as a 5-year plan.
And all of this would be done prior to Fountain Hill. So by being able to fix out these 2 and have a fixed debt portfolio, it helps us structure that advantageously for you. I think we're already utilizing a wraparound structure where we're putting principal in 2033 and throughout after you have a drop off to help mitigate budgetary impact. So by doing this and then doing a financing plan afterwards, we'd have a fixed rate portfolio that would be, put you guys in a great spot to layer additional debt on with certainty of budgeting instead of uncertainty of variable rate payments.
Yeah, and if we were to go to page 7,
Mhm.
which is essentially the scenario where we say, nope, we're going to continue down this path of variable rate notes. It's hard to see on that screen, but you can see where it's actually a whole lot more expensive than either of the scenarios or any of the 3 scenarios we've talked about thus far. So simply doing nothing, while it seems like a good option, is actually the more expensive option. And while it may cost us a little bit of money, I think the real discussion needs to be, are we comfortable spending a little bit more to fix our payments and we've come up with a structure that helps us do that? Or do we simply want to say, you know, A is attractive, that's a no-brainer. I think we could all agree. Let's wait on taking any action on B, but, you know, given the different scenarios, this may be an opportunity for us to fix both with a little bit of expense, but still gets us the results that we're looking for.
Harry, is it safe to say that the fees of delaying will be more than $200,000 of just biting the bullet now?
I mean, there are definitely some economies to do it all now. The team's ready to go. By delaying, there'd probably be some additional fees, but there's another deal, as Harry pointed out, next year anyway. So it might be fairly.
Or with the
same.
variable rate issue, you have to go out every.
Oh,
2
yeah,
years
absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah. Staying with variable rate, you see this every, we call it maintenance. Something needs to happen every
Right.
couple of years, and there are definite costs to that as well as risk.
Yeah, and I think maybe Dr. Silva, one of the things we have to think through is not on this chart, is the cost of reissuing those debt. So you gotta pay underwriters, you're gonna pay, a bond counsel, finance counsel, the rating agencies, we can put a whole list together. It's safe to assume it's somewhere in the 2.5%, 3% range of principal. So there's gonna be costs to go out and refinance, or at least go back out to market and see what else is out there. Because we've done the legwork and we know what's coming in and we know what the variable rate structures look like. Again, I think the discussion is, do we want to just take on A? Or are we comfortable taking on a little bit of extra cost, wrapping the structure around and really going with both practices? And I think that's sort of why we're having this discussion about the funds here.
The recommendation from Dr. Silva and Harry is scenario 2 at this point, correct? I just want to make sure.
It's the scenario where we extend out one additional year.
Yeah.
Because we have an opportunity for us to get fixed value for the expenses that we're putting out. And again, it'll be 200,000 more expensive, but we're gonna figure that out if we went out, and then another building in another year, if not more. And when the rates go down, we'll actually end up paying on 26 million. Our termination cost will be 2.4, so you're looking at another $400,000 expense by simply delaying it a year. And crystal ball's broken, but if it goes down, it's definitely gonna be more.
Any other questions, comments?
So our recommendation is A and B, extend it a little bit, wrap it around the debt and get that degree of certainty from 2 fixed rate notes.
Just real quick, this is why variable math is important. Because one of my brothers is an accountant who says, it's just numbers, calm down. But I was on the phone with him about this, but I don't calm next to multiple comments. But anyway, I understand the extension and the more secure fixed rate in the loan. It gives us a better chance of projecting that as we pay off in the future. You mentioned Fountain Hill, but there's also the potential of our expansion over at both sides. And I'm sure, I'm asking, can you please confirm that this is the same kind of debt sequence that we may have to incur as we're still working through the details of that?
Yeah, we're actually in constant communication with BFM, working on different scenarios of what if and how would that work out. We have another chart that's not included in here that includes the Babbitt stat.
Okay.
It'll be a very similar structure where we wrap it around to the years where it's more affordable, delay the principal payments so that we can continue to have stability. And what we're looking for is predictability and overall balance.
Thank you for that. Speaking of predictability and stability on that, when we're looking at these kinds of projections, I guess this is just more of a public comment when we as a board are trying to set future budgets in the big picture type of thing. This is this lurking shadow that keeps its ugly rearing, obligation over us. And what we're basically trying to do, I'm just trying to articulate this so when it comes out of my mouth, it makes sense. So that means I understand it. So when we're looking at this as a secured understanding that this is what we are owing, this is not just to pay this off. This is to give us a financial stability so that future borrowing is more easily obtained for future things.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just needed to say it to make sure I got it. Great, thank you.
So if we all agree, just kind of putting out the process, that this is the option to go with, we would have to redraft the resolution that was approved because that has parameters that says up to 500,000. We'll have our bond counsel redraft the resolution and that'll be on the board agenda to pass next Monday. And at that point, hopefully Scott's feeling better and he'll be there to kind of answer additional questions that may arise. But we feel very strongly that that's the best option for the district, just weighing all the other opportunities.
You turn your mics off. Sorry. Everybody else is on. All right, so that'll be on the agenda for next week. Any other questions or comments from board members? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is 2.02 PA School Boards Association Officer Candidates. I believe everybody has that at their sheet, at their seat today. Just fill that out, give it back to Harry. I don't believe there's any. I believe there's one person for every position, so. All right, and then 2.03 is the Babbitt's Articles of Agreement. So we'll be voting at the special meeting at the end of tonight on the renewal of the Babbitt's agreements. The 60-day window has expired, so we can vote on that. And Dr. Silva, do you have some discussion on this?
That's a follow through from the July Joint Operating Committee meeting where each of the 3 contributing districts were responsible going back into their district and voting on it as their own district. So that's a 60-day. Today's past the 60 days. So we would act with the recommendation of the administration that this board approve the revised and amended joint the articles as written.
And just to confirm, we'll also have the voting on our conflict solicitor for that process tonight also.
Correct.
Any discussion on that? Dr. Beck-Pulley?
I was just gonna ask just to clarify or sort of restate, which we've discussed already as a board, that the document that we're voting on was presented to us, right? If you want to sort of go by the Babbitt's board, it was what they voted on to send to the districts. I don't know if there's any just like 1-minute version of exactly where this document came from. It's sort of presented to all of the districts to approve.
Yeah, it was basically, it's a renewal of the existing operating agreement. Solicitor Spry's office made some updates to it to reflect date changes and some updates, I believe, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a change in some things that we were incorporated. Don, do you want to just explain what the changes were, if there was any?
Which is what would make an expansion possible and get that process moving and underway, which so many of us want to see. Perfect.
All right, any other discussion on that?
There'll be time for more discussion during the voting
Yep.
meeting, and then we would like to make public comment.
All right.
Well, I guess I would just make a clarification. This extends the existing plan for another 30 years, and then on the back of the page, it also expands the financing. So we're renewing the project and approving financing at the same time. What we have in a special committee meeting is a little bit different than this. I don't know if we want to go into that, but the special committee meeting is going to hire conflict counsel, should this not get approved by all of the districts. And then they'll negotiate a new terms of an agreement. So this is exactly what was recommended by the Joint Operating Committee. If approved, this will go into the Finance Committee, into the Board Committee later in the month, whereas the next session does not talk about this. It's in addition to this.
If all 3 districts do not approve it, there would be a dissolution.
Yeah, just to clarify, all 3 boards, Saucon Valley, Northampton, Bethlehem, have to vote on the amended and restated Articles of Agreement. So we're doing our part tonight, but just in case Saucon Valley doesn't do their part, we're preparing to go to battle with them if we have to, or negotiate whatever needs to be done there. Any other questions, comments on that? That will be on later. So moving on to number 3, information items. I don't have any. Dr. Silva, do you have anything? All right. So then we'll go on to item number 4, agenda items for the September 23rd, 2024 regular board meeting. 4.01, the mail machine lease agreement. It's pretty standard.
The main difference between what we're getting now and what the new proposal is, the supplies will be included as part of the lease.
Okay. Any questions on that? 4.02, Colonial Intermediate IU-20 contract for service agreements. They're all there. We do these every year. Yep. Any questions on that? 4.03, the officer candidates. Like I said, it's at your seat before, so we'll be voting on that officially on the 23rd. 4.04, there was a district donation that we're receiving from Service Electric. Any comments on that? All right. 4.05, Colonial Intermediate Unit 20 School Nutrition Program Agreement. Anything? Nope.
Customary.
Customary, yep. The Burke one agreement for the homestead mailing, so something we do every year, so.
Another annual item.
Yeah.
You can see the cost went up just ever so slightly. But it's our normal annual item for mailing out homesteads.
Postage went up. It's all right, and then we all have an opening on the Board of Trustees from Northampton. That was also at your seat tonight. So they are filling the NCC Board of Trustees seat. Any comments on that one?
Just a comment that the passing of Nicholas F. Liddy is our loss, not just for that Board of Trustees, but for the Lehigh Valley, he's a great educator alongside the Northampton. I happen to have had him for compositional English 101. He's a great teacher, so saying the reason for the vacancy for that occasion, and I just give my sympathies to the Northampton.
All right. Any other comments, questions on that? Number 5, courtesy of the floor, 5.01, public comment on any subject. Being none, open forum. All right, seeing none, adjournment. We will
5 minutes.
be 5 minutes and start the human resource.
Thank you, Mr. Rashidi. No, I know it's in there.
All right, thank you.
Which one, Michael Baird?
The one for Shannon sign.
No.
Did you take it? No, not
The other one?
Like, I have an extra one.
That's why I went for a walk. Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was fun. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 16th, 2024 Board Human Resource Committee meeting. First up, we have courtesy of the floor for agenda items only. There'll be a second courtesy of the floor at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, we have discussion items 2.01, the school board policy 249, bullying and cyberbullying, second reading.
I have the pleasure of having Claire sitting next to me, and she will answer any of your technical questions related to policy 249.
Good evening, everybody. Based upon our discussion at last Monday night's meeting, I had a lengthy conversation with Paige Gross, our attorney from King Spry, and reviewed the policy and the questions that were being asked. And so at your seat, you do have a memorandum from Don Spry and Paige Gross in regards to the questions. What we are recommending is, and this is hot off the press as of 4 o'clock today, which is why it's not in, but we are recommending that the following: the superintendent or designee shall annually review the district's administrative regulations and procedures with regard to the investigations of any complaints of bullying. After review, the superintendent or designee, in communications with the chief pupil service officer, may determine that the district's administrative regulations and procedures need to be revised or additional training for district staff and students must be provided. That the determination shall be at the sole discretion of the superintendent or designee. So this is what we are recommending to add to the policy based upon the discussions from last week.
If we remember last Monday, part of the conversation was to what specificity should we put procedural items in a policy? So getting this clarification from King Spry as far as what's advisable language would address that.
Dr. White?
Just a question then.
Reading the policy as is, when we talk about the consequences for the violations, when it says parental conference, this is a policy, not a procedure. So does that mean that there would be parental conference for all bullying issues that are brought to the attention of the administration?
Tell me where you're referring to, Cheryl.
In consequences violation, I think it's the final page of the policy. It's the final section, consequences for violations. Item number 2 says parental conference.
So consequences for violations, these are some of the things that may occur. Okay? So which may include, so it's up. Any other questions?
Dr. Beck-Cooley? Just two quick things on the second page. There's some new language around students are encouraged to put the complaint in writing. This isn't necessarily an edit. I was just curious about how this overlaps with submissions through Safe to Say.
The Safe to Say is a notification for us, right? So when we investigate a Safe to Say, we're following up with the individuals that are listed, if they're listed in the Safe to Say, because sometimes they're not, and we have to do the investigation. So in this section, what we did was we clarified that it could be put in writing or verbal, so that if a student verbally told us or a parent, we sometimes ask them to put it in writing so that it gives us the documentation as well. But we could accept it either way. It doesn't have to be in writing.
And so if someone had submitted an anonymous Safe to Say,
Then
that
we
would
would,
prompt this.
that
policy.
would, yes, we would look into that. So every Safe to Say or handle with care notification that comes in is indeed investigated.
It's a written.
It's a right.
Okay.
So we're obligated to take a look at those investigations.
Okay.
Okay?
Awesome. That was one of my, and the only other question is just a little bit further on that page. That when a student behavior, sorry, I'm like so blind. When a student's behavior indicates a threat to the safety of the student, and again, whether it's an edit or just sort of the way the word safety is understood, it's more than just their physical safety. If the
That is
student has been sort of
correct.
harassed,
Correct. So we
Socially
would do
harassed, you
a
know.
threat assessment.
and so it's not limited to someone being physically punched or hit to be bullied. This could be sort of cyberbullying and
Correct.
lies spread or something like
Mhm.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. thank you, for going there, Dr. Berkoli. I want to just make sure that I'm clearly understanding this in a very basic way. The policy is the what and the procedure is the how.
Correct.
Okay.
That is
So
correct.
this is the what.
This is the
Um,
what.
And when I was reading this with that framework in mind, especially on reflection of the public comments that came last week, the concerns about reporting and then being bullied because of the reporting. Here in our policy, it says that all reports and any types of complaints that are given to the district, all possible precautions are being taken to maintain the anonymity of any complaint.
Correct. Correct.
But that's just the what. The
Correct.
how is not going to be decided in this policy, or will it be policed in this policy? There's really nothing more that can be written to say the assurances of anonymity, that's our what.
That's your procedures. right?
Okay,
So it
because,
go-
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, because in this next paragraph, you say reprisal or retaliation. And so I'm just saying, the district is already putting in place what happens when that happens
Correct.
by circumstance of things outside the district administration control. I just want that publicly clarified because it is
That is-
so
That is
challenging
correct.
in this issue. It is so challenging for us to keep separated the what and the how. And we really have to be calm and cool about it when we're trying to figure out what's best.
That is correct.
That's hard to do.
Mhm.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Any other comments on this? 2.01? Mr. Lozey, Mr. Schenkel? You're good. Okay.
We'll be back for a third reading and third and final reading and approval next week.
And it will have that paragraph inserted into the policy.
Thank you. And just for public record, people who are watching the video, the YouTube video of this meeting who have concerns about this policy, I would encourage you to get on the policy and read this so that if you have concerns in public comment, that you come forth at the public meeting next week. This is a very important issue and we need to hear the voices on this of our community. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
nothing.
you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Hogan. Okay, next up, under information items, 3.01, Title IX.
Yes, just to bring the board up to speed, there are new Title IX regulations that went into effect there for the 2024 school year. And they are significant changes as far as definitions, processes, and procedures. Currently, the district has a couple policies, 103 and 103.1 that deal with students. The 103 is non-discrimination in school and classroom practices. And 103.1 is non-discrimination on the basis of sex in school and classroom practices. What we will be recommending is to replace those two policies with one new policy from PSBA that incorporates all the new language outlined in the 2024 Title IX ruling. And then also similar in the staffing, the 104 and the 104.1 to replace that with the new PSBA policy. That title would be called Discrimination Harassment Affecting Students for the 103 and Discrimination Harassment Affecting Employees for the 104. Again, this will bring us into compliance. We will not eliminate the 103 and 103.1 and 104 and 104.1 until we're sure we've closed everything out from previous years. Because with the new legislation, it has made clear that if something would be brought to your attention that occurred in March of last year, you have to investigate that and follow the procedures of the 2024 Title IX regulations. And then anything that has occurred from August 1st on has to be investigated and followed under the 2024 regulations. A group of us have been meeting. Claire, Rebecca Keller-Getz, and myself attended a full-day training on the new Title IX regulations. We have met, then included Tracy Herner and Mitchell Hendricks as part of the team that is looking at what's called the grievance procedures. And we are using that to investigate and follow for both Title IX and non-Title IX discrimination. So we're using one set of practices and procedures, so it does not get as confusing. And there's also an electronic data collection tool, reporting tool that Mitchell has put together that we'll use to track this using Google. I just wanted to make you aware of this. We put some final changes on the policy today. We'll be sending that to King's Pride just for their review. And then my hope is to actually send that to you because it's a quite a lengthy document prior to the first report of this during the curriculum committee in October, because I would like to have it presented to the curriculum committee, then the HR committee, and then have it approved at the the October school board meeting. And you'll notice that there were also references to Title IX in the new hazing or bullying policy as well. So it all goes hand in hand, and we've been working together as a team to make sure that it is seamless. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Dr. White?
Thank you. This is a hot news topic with Title IX. And again, I want to reaffirm, when we're talking about our policies, we're talking about what it is.
Correct.
And so the documents that you're going to be preparing for us do not get into the weeds of how we enforce it or address any infractions toward Title IX.
Correct.
So with that stated, I'm really glad that the district did this training because Title IX is a hotbed of change, and it's something that we're going to be hearing a lot about. And I think it's going to be very important for all of us to really keep focusing on what the changes are, what that means for this district, and what we have to do to uphold the law of this Title IX. Yes?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Then all I want to know for the curriculum meeting ahead of time is with this, I don't know if this is appropriate. I just want to make sure that I'm not over-reading or over-researching or overdoing anything with regard to this, because like I said, it's in the news a lot, and I get a ton of things sent to me about this in terms of interpretation of Title IX. So this is exactly, succinctly, you've gone through this with our consultation of our legal entities. This is it.
Yes,
So-
you will see the PSBA recommended policy
Right.
with any edits from King's Pride, as well as what the district embedded as far as our specific information.
Thank you.
There will be a lot of council's eyes on this one because PSBA has a huge legal team to begin with in drafting policy. And then just for the extra layer of protection, we'll run it by our council. So by the time it comes out into draft form, it will be well-studied legally.
Mrs. Levy?
Will everyone be trained on Title IX, the staff and everyone?
Yes. They're in the Vector Solutions program that the district subscribes to. They have a Title IX training that gets pushed out to everybody electronically. I can also tell you, in addition to the training that we attended, the IU is looking to bring in a training through ATIXA, that's the Association of Title IX Administrators. It will be a multiple day training on the coordinators and the investigation. Also, Rebecca Keller-Getz may be going to the ATIXA conference outside of Philadelphia at the end of October for a training if that fits her schedule. So we are looking at making sure our staff members are, trained.
Dr. White?
And how often are they trained? Is it every year or?
We push that out. With the new regulations, we will be pushing that out every year.
Does the staff include coaches and external contractors who are going to have to wrestle with Title IX issues?
We have not discussed the external contractors yet, but we can work on that. As far as like the STS, substitutes that come into us, yes, that's not a problem. It would be if we subcontracted with some special group, we would have to look at that and what we could work into their contract.
And please articulate for me that Title IX, I think I heard you was about, I heard language, you said classroom or other district activities. We're talking about any activity that is under the auspices of district supervision.
Yes, the policy spells that out very clearly.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have some agenda items for the September 23rd, 2024 regular board meeting. 4.01 will be the school board policy, 249 bullying, cyberbullying. It'll be the third read. Anyone have any objections of that going on? Okay. 4.02, we have the employee assistance program agreement.
Yes, this is year 2 of a 2-year commitment, and they just renew the contract each year.
Any concerns with that? Okay, you'll see that next week. 4.03, Northampton Community College Agreement.
Yes, this affiliation agreement for their students to come into the district is a 3-year commitment. It has been reviewed by Kingsbury, and Northampton County Community College agreed to those changes by the solicitor.
Seeing no comments. 4.04, PHEAA, PA Student Teacher Support Program.
Yes, the governor has created this grant program to create a pipeline for educators coming in to help lower the cost. He put in a couple $1 million. However, it was scooped up right away with people who applied for it. And there's a multiple stage process where potential student teachers had to apply, then they had to be accepted by their university, and then the districts have to accept that. The district has been working with a couple local universities to accept that. And now we're at the stage where we have to agree that we would be willing to facilitate this and do the payments, even though we'll get the money, we'll send it out, but we have to be part of the program. So we're at that step right now. And this does that for us.
This is excellent news, a good first step. You've heard me many times in this committee saying only the teaching profession asks somebody to do a year-long unpaid internship to become certified in its position. The governor, I think, recognizes the impact that has in a number of certificated people being available for schools to hire, and by providing these stipends and other remedies to help address the shortage of professionals in the pipeline to serve school districts. So congratulations to the governor on this one.
Any comments on that? Mrs. Levy?
How many students applied and how many were accepted?
I would have to get that information because it goes to the state. We wouldn't have all of that hard data. We'd have to go back into the universities to find out how many of their students actually did apply and how many then were accepted. We may have 40 student teachers that come here, but how many of those applied and were rejected because the funds, it was on a first come, first served basis? And I couldn't tell you that, but we can try to find that information out.
Dr. White?
Do you know if there is a procedure in the application process by the state to approve these funds for students who applied that offer an opportunity for more representation in future teachers, more diverse representation to become more teachers? And I'm just wondering if there's a layer of the application process that can support more diversity in our future core.
I would have to check on that. I do not have that information.
It will have that effect, though.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any other questions on that? Okay, then you will see all 4 of these next week on the 23rd. Next up, we have courtesy of the floor for any item. Don't all jump at the chance. Okay. Everyone's so excited to talk. Next up, we have open forum. Mr. Alozzi.
Anybody here from Mr. Antalix?
No, I just said that.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Mr. Antalix, anybody?
I just said to him 2 seconds ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in a while. I'll have to check if he's been at council or not.
Well, we'll see if he's at council meeting tomorrow
Is he
night,
at-
so I'll do
Okay,
it.
let us know.
Other than that, no, nothing. nothing here.
Just shows you have a big heart looking out for him. Okay. Seeing nothing else, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Dr. White. And then,
We'll take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break.
For our special board meeting. Thank you very much, Mrs.
Thank you.
Vice President.
They are. It's been beautiful, except we have a bear that keeps getting in our trash. It's like driving me crazy. Bear? Like upward. Jamie, where do you live? Bears don't live by me. Up near the beacon. Okay. And we've been there 7 years, and this is the first year. And like, I usually park my car in the garage, but people tips the garage over at like 11 o'clock, and I'm looking out our bathroom window. And the guy is like, "Oh, it's too much noise." I'm trying to get his picture of it. And it's like a safe place.
Oh my goodness.
Johnny has a video of one day like that. When we first moved, there was a little one, and I was showing him a picture, and he was like, out in the back of the picture. And I was like,
That's the same one, that's 500 pounds.
they can be, I get more upset over the deer than I do the bear. The deer just eat everything. They destroy all my plants. They come up on our back porch, we have a 4-foot fence, they jump the fence, they eat my shrubs, it drives me crazy. Yeah, the bear is a little interesting.
Nope, that's not where I live.
No. I'm a little bit more cautious when I go out first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
When we first moved to the house, I was at the house. Took our first shelter out, and well, bear was almost. All
Yeah.
I said, well, how big is it? I'm asking all. You gotta be kidding me.
I definitely see more, now that we don't have a dog, I think that's why the deer are jumping more, they don't smell her and stuff. So they're definitely in the yard a lot more.
It's in the trash can and stuff. Not bothering me.
Yeah. I wish I could just get a good picture of it.
The picture of the bear?
Yeah. Take one here.
Go get him, kid.
You can do it. Yes, let's turn on the microphone.
Oh, you want this? Hold on, let me get to my place here.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 16th, 2024 special board meeting. Mr. Risakadian, could I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Levy,
Here.
Mr. Allozy,
Here.
Mr. Fascinetto, Mrs. Patrick. Here. Mr. Rusciuti. Here. Mrs. Schenkel. Here. Dr. Shively,
Here.
Dr. White,
Here.
Dr. Beck Cooley,
Here.
8 members present. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Could you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Could you please join me in a moment of silent meditation? Okay, thank you. First up, we're going to have courtesy of the floor for agenda items only. There will be a second courtesy of the floor at the end of the meeting for any topic.
And just a moment to make sure that our video, our audio did not work at the last board meeting. I think we're all set so that everything is being recorded this evening as normal.
Wonderful.
We have 3 items on our agenda, Mrs. Patrick, if you want to lead us through those.
Absolutely. First up, 7.01, agreement between the Board of School Directors and the Teamsters Local Number 773, covering clerical and secretarial employees.
As included and as was ratified by the Teamsters 773 local, it's presented tonight for your approval.
Any questions or concerns on this topic? Okay, thank you. Next up, 7.02, Bethlehem Area Vocational Technical School, amended and restated Articles of Agreement. Anyone want to speak on 7.02? Mrs. Schenkel?
Yeah, so just to, reiterate that this is, the articles of agreement are expiring, and in order for the VOTEC to continue, they need to be agreed upon by the three pending districts. So we've had, conversations, and it's been 35 years that these articles have been in place and working well. And they are in line with all of the other career and technical institutes in Pennsylvania. So just bringing it to the board to approve our amended and restated articles.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this? Dr. White?
Yes, I do want to just restate that these articles of agreement are also how we split the responsibilities of funding and financing the operations as well as the hard costs of our area VOTEC. And it's important to note that when we have been having these conversations and discussions about the expansion of the VOTEC, which is desperately needed to maintain a progressive workforce that's able to serve new technologies that are needed by the community businesses and industry, as well as the fact that we have waiting lists for students who cannot get into these incredibly valuable programs. And I will say that the faculty and the staff at our Bethlehem area VOTEC school are fiercely student-focused and dedicated to their success. So what these articles of agreement do, not only do they articulate our responsibilities as board members who oversee the operations, but it also articulates our shared responsibility for making sure that the fiscal management of the school and its growth are done in accordance to what all the students from the representative districts can have access to. This is an important document, and we've been sitting on this for 10 months. And as we continue to linger on approving this, the cost for the expansion keeps getting greater and greater and greater. And we have to make a determination of whether we're going to continue with this 3-school district or not. And so what we are doing tonight is we are voting to approve as they are as the Bethlehem area school district. We have to wait for the other 2 school districts to come together to decide if we're going to keep moving forward in this fashion, as it has worked for how many years now? 35, 40 years? But if something happens where one of the other school districts decides something else, then we're going to have some more things to discuss and to finance. Thank you.
Dr. Beck-Pooley?
Yeah, and just to clarify a process thing, sort of where this document is coming from that we're, voting on tonight, that this was a document that was created by and approved by the Joint Committee of the Bethlehem Vocational Technical School. So it was voted on by that group to be presented to all of the districts that participate in VOTEC. And that meeting occurred on July 8th, and so that's why we have considered this, and we're sort of responding to what that joint committee is asking us to do. So just, again, process-wise, this has been sort of an ongoing flurry of meetings, but this document comes out of that joint committee, sort of the 3 school districts that oversee Bethlehem area VOTEC had an opportunity, majority vote on these documents. These were the ones approved, and theirs are coming to the districts. Any other comments?
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to 7.03, the appointment of Eckert Siemens as special counsel related to the Articles of Agreement for the new Bethlehem Area Vocational Technical School.
Yes, Mrs. Patrick, the recommended action associated with this is that the Board of School Directors approves the appointment of Eckert Siemens as special counsel related to the negotiations of the new Bethlehem Area Vocational Technical School, Articles of Agreement, and/or create a new Area Vocational Technical School entity that excludes Saucon Valley School District as per solicitor review. I would ask Mr. Aristakezian to go into a little bit of detail about the specific recommendation and firm.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. So the previous recommendation is what came out of the Joint Operating Committee and essentially renews everything as is what stood in effect since 1965. So it's been working for quite some time. Should all three districts not agree that this is the way to move forward, we're going out and getting conflict counsel. Why are we doing that? Well, Kingsbury happens to represent all of the districts involved. And so to get I don't want to say fair to get an alternate view and representation. We're hiring Eckert Seaman. Why are we going with Eckert Seaman? They have quite a bit of experience in the CTE space. You know, they've done lots of different training sessions, whether it be for the consortiums that involve CTEs, whether it be for PASBO presentations. So they have a pretty varied history with CTEs. That firm also happens to be our bond counsel, so we reach out to them for advice quite frequently. Very helpful overall. They have the expertise, they have the know-how, they have the existing relationship with us. So just in case the articles don't get approved exactly as written and recommended by the Joint Operating Committee, then we have conflict counsel that'll help renegotiate new terms of agreement and whatever that new picture looks like.
Mrs. Schenkel, as president of the joint committee, would you like to comment on this?
Sure. So just to give a full background, the initial discussion on expansion began 2 years ago in September of 22, with the first plans actually presented in December of 22. At that meeting, Saucon Valley School Board representatives actually suggested that this expansion that was presented was not large enough. And all of the additional joint committee members agreed and said, you know, with the way things are going, we'll do this expansion. We're going to have to do another expansion in another year or two. It's going to cost more money. Like, let's do it right the first time. And again, everybody agreed. So this resulted in a committee which got together and then presented new plans in May of 23. At the June 23, remember all these dates. At the June 23rd, 23 meeting, Saucon Valley School Board members for the first time shared concerns about price of the project along with the funding formula. So again, keep in mind that this is the first time in months of conversation. In September of 23, multiple funding formulas were presented to the Joint Committee, and it was recommended that the boards go back to their individual district boards in the hope that an amenable proposal could be brought forward to the JC. In 10/23, both Bethlehem and Northampton said that they were good with the Articles of Agreement that have been in place since 35 years, however long it was. Again, discussion on those agreements, why they are the way they are, and how they are in line with all of the other career and technical institutes in the area. Saucon Valley did not bring a response, and so there was not an agreement between the three districts. The discussion was put on hold because the November elections were coming up, and there were a number of seats that were up at the time, so it seemed to make sense to wait. Good thing that we did, because after the elections, there was some significant turnover. So at that point, the sending representatives requested that Adam come and do presentations at each individual board again. So bring the presentation of the expansion and the documentation and things like that to, he called it his roadshow. So he went and did those presentations again. The districts were then asked to bring their decisions back. So now they've had this presentation, they have their new board members. So please bring back what their decision is on the expansion and the articles to the April meeting. So again, Northampton, Bethlehem, yes for the expansion, and yes, let's keep the articles as is. Saucon Valley did not present an option, even though given plenty of, really requests to do so. So fast forward to May of 24, not too long ago, where each district was asked to present a proposal if they wanted changes. So it was made very clear, if your district wants changes, present them at the May 24 meeting so that we can all discuss them and come up with something. No presentations were made. Bethlehem did not make one because we didn't have one to make. We were good with the way things were, and the same thing with Northampton. Saucon Valley did not make a presentation, did not present any alternatives. We did not say anything. So moving forward again to July 3rd, we received proposed articles of agreements from Saucon Valley that included date changes, funding formula changes, and a change to the voting structure. This was the first time any mention of a change to voting structure occurred. During the special meeting on July 8th, the VOTEC Joint Committee voted to accept the initial proposed articles and not those sent in by Saucon Valley School District. These were sent to the district to be voted on after 60 days. That's what we're voting on next week. Votes can start next week for that. Or today. Sorry, I wrote my notes a week ago, so now it's a week later, so we can vote on it. Thank you. So I just wanted to go back and give all of that because I know that there has been some discussion that they weren't given an opportunity, we're not negotiating, but as you can see, it has been a full 2 years of conversation. The expansion can't move forward without the Articles of Agreement being agreed upon, and these dates are set because if things don't work and we need to dissolve, it takes months to get that taken care of. There is a lot of work that goes into doing all of that and a lot of thought to dismantling something that's been around for as long as it has. So I just wanted, again, to kind of give that background for the whole conversation. And at this point, I think as Dr. White may have mentioned, the costs we've all incurred in these delays are greater than any costs I think that have been covered or would have been covered under any changes to the articles as it is, so.
Thank you for that roundup. Dr. Shively.
So if we do dissolve and reassemble with just the two districts, that would, just for clarity's sake, that would mean that we need to buy out part of Saucon Valley, and somehow that buyout would have to be structured between the school districts. So that would be a potential cost. Can you let us or estimate what that cost might be like, but also what would the advantages be for us as well?
For Mr. Aristides and Hobson, I would say too, and Don, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're hoping that they will either just go away or, you know, decide, hey, we're not interested in this anymore, and we can just amend the current agreement. We're hoping that we don't have to go to this step where it is a full dismantling and rebuilding of the school.
Yeah. Right now. You're good.
Yeah, the articles require a majority vote of each of the 3 school districts to approve new articles. That's the third option that all districts would renew. If not, there can be a negotiation for a buyout to continue the entity, but with 2 school districts. And the reason Harry indicated that special counsel is appointed is because my firm represents the Joint Operating Committee, it represents Bethlehem, and it represents Northampton. So it's a conflict of interest for my firm to be involved in the negotiations on behalf of Bethlehem. The last situation that could occur would be creating a new entity. In other words, if a negotiation does not work and the articles cannot be amended to include 2 school districts, then the entity would have to be dissolved and a new entity created.
Obviously, we would prefer that all 3 of the school districts approve, as recommended by the Joint Operating Committee, the amended and restated Articles of Agreement. So that's what we're doing tonight as a school district. Dr. Shively asked, what if that doesn't happen? What is the cost or what is the impact on the Bethlehem Area School District? We currently have a long waiting list of over 120 students who don't have access to their preferred programs at vocational technical school. We also, as a district, have been very clear over the longest time
are potentially able to be in a new expanded school. Can you clarify that projection for me, please?
Sure. We had heard from Arif Fazil and Dewey Engineering that, we have a year to get together documents and go up to bid and things like that, and a 2-year construction project process. So if you think the average student is at VOTEC for 3 years, sophomore, junior, senior year. So if you're in 8th grade now, we're bidding in 9th grade, we're constructing in 10 and 11, you're going to come in 12th grade and you're not going to be able to take advantage of those 7 or 8 new programs that we're talking about. So you're looking at the current 6th graders that could start a new vet tech program or a new auto aviation program or any of the new programs, not the expanded ones because they're there, but you're talking about 6th graders right now who at the earliest would be the ones who could take advantage of that new, any of those 7 new programs that are offered that are not currently there. Because to come into an aviation program as a senior, I'm sure we would accommodate them, but I don't know what the benefit for that student would be.
I want to thank the board for thinking the long game. I mean, there is a cost, Dr. Shively, to unwinding and all the stuff that Mr. Aristokezian was talking about. But we take the long view in Bethlehem that, as Dr. White said, the Bavitz is an outstanding vocational technical school. It's a vital part of our high school program of studies. I view it in many cases as almost like a 23rd school of our school district. So when we talk about our own schools and we talk about our own academic programs, we take the long view. Although this recommendation is simply about approving a recommendation from the joint committee about what articles can be moving forward, I just want to make it clear that I support the board in its commitment to thinking the long term as far as the benefit of vocational technical, not just in the Bethlehem area school district, but for the vitality of the Lehigh Valley.
Mr. Fascinetto.
So I know a lot has been said before I got here, but I just want to reiterate a couple things. As I know Mrs. Schenkel shared, this has been a almost 2-year process at this point. It has really been a 15-year discussion since my first days at VOTEC. There was always the talk of, we need to expand school. The house across the street, the house project took up a lot of energy and effort, but there's been various discussions. There hasn't been an expansion in decades. The last anything that happened in the early 2000s was really redoing the outside, the surface. But we haven't seen anything in a long time. Except for a food truck, which has been a wonderful expansion. But one thing I will say is that we have done everything we can in Bethlehem to get students to VOTEC. We have changed our high school schedule. We've looked at what makes the most sense. All of those have cost us significant more money in tuition. The more students we get there, the more money we pay. But it's a small price to pay for what students get out of VOTEC. And it's not the stigma of VOTEC anymore. It is a stepping out into the workforce at 18 years old with no debt and a family sustaining job. I mean, if I was 18 and graduated and could have made 50, 60,000, please, I would do that tomorrow if I could not have debt. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about students. We're talking about their future. The unique part of VOTEC in its 59-year history and my 15-year history there has always been members on the board who did not agree, not politically, not that word I can't say about ideologies, or even a philosophy for public education. But VOTEC has always been a unifying force where we did get along. We have had, in my 15 years, there has been a handful of contentious votes. No one ever screamed or ran out of the room, but it's not always a 9-0 vote. There's been 5-4 votes, and there's been times where things that we wanted in Bethlehem didn't go through because we saw the passion of the other 2 districts and where they felt. And frankly, you need other districts to vote yes with us because our 5 alone does nothing. So you need affirmative votes from either Nazareth, I keep saying that, Northampton or Saucon Valley or both. And it's really a shame that we're at this point. It truly is, because we're talking about spending significant portions of money that we don't have to keep the school operating and to be able to expand it and get our students in there. But like I said, it's been something where it didn't matter what your political philosophy was. We always agreed at VOTEC. I can think of former members that I probably agreed on nothing with them except for their support of VOTEC and what it meant to students and why we kept it open. So it is not an easy road to where we're at, and we are not by any means, from my perspective, just trying to bully our way into getting what we want. But also, sixth graders would be the first group to set foot in this new school. We cannot continue to wait. You know, we're $5 million over the original project cost. So any savings that we heard of a year ago in September are gone. So if we would agree to what we had a year ago, September, everybody would be paying less than if we agreed to the proposal that was adopted by Saucon Valley in July. So we cannot continue to wait. I hope there's a resolution to this, and I hope we have something that can throw this contract with a new council away. And I hope we don't have to draft separate articles. That's not our intent. But if we have to, we will. And that's where we're at. We're not going to wait till May to say at the 11th hour, we made it, because there's 100 and some employees whose livelihood depends on what we do. And they are sitting on the edge of their seat while a bunch of volunteer elected officials fight over what to me is nonsense at this point, minimal dollars. So we owe it to them. We have to be prepared and we have to move forward. And hopefully come July 1st, we have 3 districts sitting around the table continuing a 59-year tradition of career in tech ed. And as Dr. White said, it's the gem. We hear a lot about LCTI, and LCTI does great things, and we're blessed in Lehigh Valley to have such great schools, but Babbitt's is truly a gem. Mr. Lazarchek and has always been a step ahead on things. Mr. Galler, along with him, they've really brought a lot of great things to the school, from the food truck to new programs to anticipating when to scale down a program and when to expand a program. And they were even at a national conference this summer presenting on the amazing things we've done at VOTEC. Their attendance initiatives, their NOCD initiatives to try and increase scores, and everything focusing on student. There's a lot more social emotional learning than you would ever imagine goes on at VOTEC. So it really is a special place, and you can talk to any student who goes there. For some of them, it was life-changing. For some, it was life-saving that got them on the right path and kept them in school. So like, we go out of our way to make sure an athlete can take the court, because that's what brings them to school every day. VOTEC is what brings a lot of kids to school every day and sets them on a career pathway. So like I said, I know a lot was shared. I'm sure I repeated some things, but that's where we're at from my perspective. It's not going to be a pleasant vote, but it's one we need to take.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, at this time, can I have a motion to approve item 7.01 to 7.03? Mr. Lozzi, second. Second. Mrs. Schenkel, thank you. Mr. Vistakasian, would you call roll?
Mrs. Levy,
Approved.
Mr. Lozzi,
Oh, what's wrong with it?
There you go.
Yes, with appreciation to those who labored to to get 7.0, 7.1 together, and to the fine members of our secretarial staff.
Mr. Fascinato,
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
Mr. Raschuti,
Yes.
Mrs. Schenkel,
Yes.
Dr. Shively,
Yes.
Dr. White,
Yes.
Dr. Beck Cooley.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you very much. Dr. Silva, any new or miscellaneous business tonight? Okay. At this time, we'll have courtesy of the floor for any item. Okay, seeing none, open forum, anything from the board? Dr. Beck Cooley.
Just one last reminder that next week's board meeting is at Brockle.
Thank you. I'd be there all by myself at East Hills. Thank you. Anything else for open forum?
Executive session to follow for legal.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn? Dr. White and Dr. Shively. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President.